the laws. Ecclesiasticus chapter 39, verse 1. But he that giveth his mind to the law of the Most High, and is occupied in the meditation thereof, will seek out the wisdom of all the ancient, and be occupied in prophecies. He will keep the sayings of the renowned men, and where subtle parables are, he will be there also. He will seek out the secrets of grave sentences, and be conversant in dark parables. He shall serve among great men, and appear before princes. He will travel through strange countries, for he hath tried the good and the evil among men. And where do we leave off, Shamash?
We're going to start at 3:30.
3:30. Okay. $3:30. There you go, brother, Elder Shamash.
All right. A cohen with a physical blemish must not enter the sanctuary of or approach the altar. Oh, it was way over there. Leviticus 21 and 23. Only he shall not go into the veil, nor come nigh unto the altar, because he had a blemish, that he profaned not my sanctuary, for I, the Lord, do sanctify them.
A Cohen with a physical blemish must not serve. Leviticus 21:17. Speak unto Aaron, saying, whoever he be of thy seed in the generations that have any blemish, let him not approach to offer the bread of his God.
Ron, if you want to read that for us. Number 332.
332.
Yes, sir.
A Cohen with a temporary blemish must not serve. Leviticus 21:17. Speak unto Aaron, saying, whosoever he be of thy seed in their generations that hath any blemish, let him not approach to offer the bread of his God.
One who is not a Cohen must not serve. Numbers chapter 18, verse 4. And they shall be joined unto thee, and keep the charge of the tabernacle of the congregation. For all the service of the tabernacle, and a stranger shall not come nigh unto you. A Cohen is a Levitical priest. Go ahead, Elder Shamash.
To offer only unblemished animals. Leviticus 22 and 21. And whosoever offered a sacrifice of peace offering unto the Lord to accomplish his vow, or a free will offering in beeves or sheep, it shall be perfect to be accepted. There shall be no blemish therein.
Not to dedicate a blemished animal for the altar. Leviticus 22:20. But whatsoever hath a blemish, that shall ye not offer, for it shall not be acceptable for you.
Not to slaughter a blemished animal for the altar. Leviticus 22:22. Blind or broken or maimed or having a wind or scurvy or scab, ye shall not offer these unto the Lord, nor make an offering by fire of them upon the altar unto the Lord.
Not to sprinkle the blood for the altar of an animal which has a blemish. Leviticus chapter 22, verse 24. You shall not offer unto the Lord that which is bruised or crushed or broken or cut. Neither shall ye make any offering thereof in your land.
Not to burn the fat for the altar of an animal which has a blemish. Leviticus 22 and 22. Blind or broken or maimed or having a wind or scurvy or scab, ye shall not offer these unto the Lord, nor make an offering by fire of them to the altar unto the Lord, upon the altar unto the Lord.
Not to offer a temporary blemished animal. Deuteronomy 17:1. Thou shalt not sacrifice unto the Lord thy God any bullock or sheep, or wherein is blemish, or any evil favoritedness, for that is an abomination unto the Lord thy God.
Not to sacrifice blemished animals, even if offered by non-Jews. Leviticus 22:25. Neither from a stranger's hand shall ye offer the bread of your God of any of these, because their corruption is in them, and blemishes be in them. They shall not be accepted for you.
Not to inflict wounds upon dedicated animals. Leviticus chapter 22, verse 21. Whosoever offereth a sacrifice of peace offerings unto the Lord to accomplish his vow, or a freewill offering in beeves or sheep, shall be perfect to be accepted. There shall be no blemish therein.
We dedicated animals which have become disqualified. Deuteronomy 12:15. Notwithstanding, thou mayest kill and eat flesh in all thy gates. Whatsoever thy soul lusts after, according to the blessings of the Lord thy God, which he hath given thee. The unclean and the clean may eat thereof, as of the roebuck and as of the hart.
To offer only animals which are at least 8 days old. Leviticus 22:27. When a bullock or a sheep or a goat is brought forth, then it shall be 7 days under the dam, and from the 8th day and thenceforth it shall be accepted for an offering made by fire unto the Lord.
Not to offer animals bought with the wages of a harlot, or the animal exchanged for a dog. Some interpret exchange for a dog as referring to wage of a male prostitute. Deuteronomy 23:19. Thou shalt not lend upon usury to thy brother, usury of money, usury of victuals, usury of anything that is lent upon usury.
Not to burn honey or yeast on the altar. Leviticus chapter 2, verse 11. No meat offering which ye shall bring unto the Lord shall be made with leaven. For ye shall burn no leaven, nor any honey in any offering of the Lord made by fire.
To salt a sacrifice, to salt all sacrifices. Leviticus 2:13. In every obligation of thy meat offering shalt thou season with salt. Neither shalt thou suffer the salt of the covenant of thy God to be lacking from thy meat offering. With all thine offerings thou shalt offer salt.
Not to omit the salt from sacrifices. Leviticus 2:13. And every oblation of thy meat offering shalt thou season with salt. Neither shalt thou suffer the salt of the covenant of thy God to be lacking from thy meat offering. With all thine offerings thou shalt offer salt.
Carry out the procedure of the burnt offering as prescribed in the Torah. Leviticus 1:3. If his offering be a burnt sacrifice of the herd, let him offer a male without blemish. He shall offer it of his own voluntary will at the door of the tabernacle of the congregation before the Lord.
Not to eat the meat of the burnt offering. Deuteronomy chapter 12, verse 17. Thou mayest not eat within thy gates the tithe of thy corn, or of thy wine, or of thy oil, or the firstlings of thy herds, or of thy flock, nor any of thy vows which thou vowest, nor thy freewill offerings or heave offering of thine hand.
Of the sin offering. Leviticus 6:18. All the males among the children of Aaron shall eat of it. It shall be a statute forever in your generation concerning the offering offerings of the Lord made by fire. Everyone that touch them shall be holy.
Not to eat the meat of the inner sin offering. Leviticus 6:23. For every meat offering for the priest shall be wholly burnt. It shall not be eaten.
Not to decapitate, Duran. You want to do that one? Oh, drop. You in there, Duran?
Strawberry and breasts are like Valencia oranges. Does that sort of hit a nerve with you? Or I want to see a strong female character.
Not to decapitate a fowl brought as a sin offering. Leviticus chapter 5, verse 8. And he shall bring them unto the priest, who shall offer that which is for the sin offering first, and wring off his head from his neck, but shall not divide it asunder.
The Cohen must eat.
353.
Sorry about that. Not to decapitate a fowl brought as a sin offering. Leviticus 5 and 8. And he shall bring them unto the priest, who shall offer that which is for the sin offering first, and wring off his head, head from his neck, but shall not divide it asunder.
All right. The Kohanim must eat the sacrificial meat in the temple. Exodus 29:33. And they shall eat those things wherewith the atonement was made, to consecrate and sanctify them, but a stranger shall not eat thereof, because they are holy.
Oh,
355. Duran, you want to take it?
The Kohanim must eat the meat outside the temple courtyard. Deuteronomy 12:17. Thou mayest not eat within thy gates the tithe of the corn, or thy wine, or of thy oil, or the firstlings of thy herds, or of thy flock, nor any of thy vows which thou vowest, nor thy freewill offerings, or heave offering of thine hand.
A non-Cohen must not eat sacrificial meat. Exodus chapter 29, verse 33. And they shall eat those things wherewith the atonement was made, to consecrate and to sanctify them. But a stranger shall not eat thereof, because they are holy.
To follow the procedure of a peace offering, Leviticus 7 and 11. And this is the law of the sacrifice of peace offering, which he shall offer unto the Lord.
All right. Not to eat the meat of minor sacrifices before sprinkling the blood. Deuteronomy 12:17. Thou mayest not eat within thy gates of the tithe, or of thy corn, or of thy wine, or of thy oil, or the firstlings of thy herds, or of thy flock, nor of any of thy vows which thou vowest, nor thy freewill offerings, or heave offering of thine hand.
To bring meal offerings as prescribed in the Torah, Leviticus 2:1. No meat offering which ye shall bring unto the Lord shall be made with leaven, for ye shall burn no leaven or any honey in any offering of the Lord made by fire.
All right. So we'll start with 360 next time. We'll start with 360 next time. All praises, you guys. All praises. All right. So again, today we're going to touch on quite a bit of history. So I have few scriptures. Today's lesson is going to come from this book that I will share out in just a moment. I do want to start with some scriptures, though. I'm going to start with some scriptures. So if you guys want to write these scriptures down. The title of the book that the primary source is coming from, the title of the book is, and this will be the title of our class. This is Without Consent or Contract, the Rise and Fall. Let me share the screen with you all so you all can see this. Let me share the screen with me. So this constitutes as the title of today's class. So, Without Consent or Contract, the Rise and Fall of American Slavery. That's big enough. Uh-oh, maybe too big. Okay, and the author is Robert William Fogel. Now, Robert William Fogel, actually, we'll come back to this author, Robert William Fogel, but this is the title of today's class. This is the title of today's class. So we're dealing with slavery today. We're dealing with slavery. Okay. And we'll come back to Fogel in just a moment. I want to start with Deuteronomy chapter 32 and verse 8.
Amen. When you get there,
Actually, start at verse 7.
All right. Amen.
all right. Deuteronomy 32 and 7. Remember the days of old. Consider the years many generations. Ask thy father, and he will show thee. My elders, and they will tell thee.
Mm-hmm.
When the Most High divided to the nations.
So whoa. Slow down. So remember the days of old. Okay. Ask thy fathers, and they will show you. Thy elders, and they will tell thee. So for us, here we are in 2021, we can go to the scriptures, especially those of us who know and understand that we are indeed descendants of Jacob. Know and understand that the folks in the Bible are our ancestors. So that the folks in the Bible, these are our family members. These are our elders. So to get an understanding of what was taking place then, we can ask them because it's recorded for us. No different than you want to know American history. What did we do? They make us take tests over the Revolutionary War, and they make us take tests over the Civil War, and they make us take tests on all this American history. But we always sat in class thinking to ourselves, who the hell is George Washington? He ain't my people. You know, I know that's how I kind of felt. And from talking with other people, that's generally people that look like me, that's generally their response. They felt no connection, with the people that the history class always brings to the table. Thomas Jefferson, and so on and so forth, Benjamin Franklin, and so on and so forth. So, but we can go to the scriptures. These people looked like us. These people, they are our ancestors. Read on.
8. When the Most High divided the nations their inheritance, when he separated the sons of Adam,
When he separated the sons of Adam, when he divided the nations, their inheritance. Inheritance, we're dealing with land allotment. Inheritance, we're dealing with a name. Inheritance, we're dealing with wealth, generational wealth. Read.
he set the bounds of the people according to the number of the children of Israel.
So all the people is based on the children of Israel. So all the divisions of the earth, of the inhabitants of earth, is based on the children of Israel. Okay, go to Leviticus chapter 25. Let me see, where is this at? I didn't write these scriptures down. Leviticus chapter 25, and go to, start at verse 39.
Amen. When you get there,
You brothers got it? Y'all good? Y'all found it already?
take that as a yes.
Can y'all hear still?
Yes, sir.
Okay, all praises.
Leviticus 25 and 39. And if thy brother that dwelleth by thee be waxen poor, and be sold unto thee, thou shalt not compel him to serve as a bound servant,
Is a bond servant.
but as a hired servant.
So he's not in what they call it, perpetuity, perpetuity, I think is the word, meaning ongoing slavery, meaning even his children are natural slaves unto you. But rather, this individual, he is he's under an agreement to get himself out the gutter. He's working to get himself out the gutter. You, his brother, you're helping him out. Read.
We start from the top again.
Yes, sir.
39, Leviticus 25 and 39. And if thy brother that dwelleth by thee be waxen poor, and be sold unto thee, thou shalt not compel him to serve as a bond servant, but as a hired servant, and as a sojourner. He shall be with thee, and shall serve thee until the year of Jubilee.
Until the 50th year. Until the 50th year. The year of Jubilee was always the 50th year. Now, jump down to 43, and then I'm going to skip a little more. Read 43.
43, thou shalt not rule over him with rigor, but shall fear thy God.
So when it comes to our brother who has gone into poverty, extreme poverty, and so he's going to come on your land, he's going to help, but he's making a wage, and you're not going to treat him with harshness, with roughness. Okay. Now jump down to verse 44.
Verse 44, that's Leviticus 25 and 44. Both the bondmen and thy bondmaids.
Now those that are in perpetual bondage to you, to your family, to your heirs. Read.
Both thy bondmen and thy bondmaids, which thou shalt have, shall be of the heathen.
Heathen, that word heathen only means, it simply means they of another nation. They of another people, which is not of the children of Israel. Read.
he shall be of the heathen that are round about you. And, of them shall ye buy bondmen and bondmaids.
Read.
Moreover, the children of the stranger,
Of the children of the strangers,
moreover, of the children of the strangers that do sojourn among you, and of them, and
Of
of
them.
them shall ye buy, and of their families that are with you, which ye begat in your land, and they shall be your possession.
They shall be your possession. Read.
And ye shall take them as a inheritance for your children after you, to inherit them for a possession.
To inherit them for. Now, this is the law. We are in the book of Leviticus. So we are reading the law. This is the law that is enacted, especially when we are in our kingdom. Right now, we're not in our kingdom. So this law still exists, but this law has gone dormant. We can't practice this law. Okay. Read.
To inherit them for a possession. They shall be your bondmen forever.
For how long?
Forever.
For how long?
Forever.
Read.
But over your brethren, the children of Israel, you shall not rule one over another with rigor.
So now, one of the biggest questions that always comes up when talking about the Bible and the reality that we are the children of Israel, and the notion that God is only for the children of Israel and not for other people. One of the questions that always comes up tends to be, well, what about the other people? You mean to tell me the other people are not going to be in the kingdom, in God's kingdom to come? Yes, they will be there. Go to Isaiah chapter 14, verse 2. Isaiah chapter 14, verse 2.
Isaiah chapter 14, verse 2. And the people shall take them and bring them to their place, and the house of Israel shall possess them in the land of the Lord for servants and handmaids.
Now this is future tense, and we know that from verse 1. This is future tense prophecy. And the people shall take them. The people who? The children of Israel shall take the heathens, shall take them and possess them. And then it's going to get even more specific as to the who the them is. Read again.
From the top.
Yes, sir.
And the people shall take them and bring them to their place, and the house of Israel shall possess them.
That word possess means I own you. That's ownership. Read.
And the house of Israel shall possess them in the land of the Lord for servants and handmaids. And they shall take them captive, whose captives they were.
Whose captives they were. Whose captives they were. Whose captives they were. Okay. Finish that out.
And they shall rule over their oppressors.
And they shall rule over their oppressors. Go to Revelation chapter 13 and verse 10. Revelation chapter 13, verse 10. Start at verse 9.
The book of Revelations, chapter 13, verse 9. If any man have an ear, let him hear.
If you have an ear, if you have not closed your heart, your mind to this understanding, then take heed and listen well. Read.
10. He that leadeth into captivity shall go into captivity.
He that leadeth into captivity shall go into captivity. Read.
He that leadeth with the sword must.
Read that again.
He that killeth with the sword must be killed with the sword.
He that killeth with the sword must be killed with the sword. Read.
Here is the patience and the faith of the saints.
Here is the patience and the faith of the saints. Saints meaning the children of Israel, right? So how did we come into America? How did our ancestors, how is it that we got here? I know that for myself, according to what my biological father shared with me, is that I'm the 5th generation on this soil brought here by way of slavery. So he that leadeth into captivity, well, that means 5 generations ago, that man was brought here by way of being a captor, must go into captivity. That means that the person who brought my was that grandfather, great-grandfather, great-great-grandfather, the man that brought my great-great-grandfather into slavery, he and his line must go into slavery. Brother Michael, come on now. His line, go to Psalms. Psalms 133. I'm sorry, Psalms 137. Psalms 137. And start at verse 7.
Psalms 137 and verse 7. Remember, O Lord, the children of Edom in the day of Jerusalem.
Now, the children of Edom is making reference to the Caucasians.
White folk, the Edomites.
Children of Edom is making reference to the Caucasians. Pause for 1 second.
Okay. Give me a second. Did y'all get that?
Yes, sir.
Everybody here?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Yeah. What I was going over, remember, O Lord, the children of Edom in the days of Jerusalem. I wasn't going over it, but Brother Mike was going over it.
Mm.
I'm trying to get an understanding of that myself. What about you?
Yeah, I'm listening, trying to, make sure I fully get a catch on to it.
What about you, man? I think he was muting, so he won't have all that background noise. But yeah, I'm at a loss. I'm hoping he comes back soon so that I can get an understanding of that.
Right. Yes.
Did you get a chance to write everything down?
Yep, I got everything down. I'm good.
Yeah. So far, yeah. I'm gonna have to. I'm trying to slow down so that I can get to all my, write all my scriptures down and put some notes in there. And so far, so good. And this note taking is important because my memory ain't the greatest.
I know that's right, man. Same here.
And these notes are, it's going to help me.
Oh yeah, always go back and look back at them.
So I just said that Edom is they of the children of the Caucasians.
Right, white folks.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So, Ryan, you still with us?
Yeah, I'm here.
All praises. All right, so you all can see that here I'm bringing some information from this book right here called Classical Baby Names.
Mm-hmm.
Classical Baby Names, Timeless Names of Modern Parents. Okay?
All right.
And so on page 72, here we have Esau. Esau, Edom, same thing. Okay. And down at the bottom, this is what it says. Okay. Shamash, can you see that and read that for us, please? Brother Joseph, can you see it and read it for it?
I don't see it. I just see a black screen with your name on it.
Okay. Hold on. You don't see? All right, hold on. Let me try
I see a black screen.
Bear with me.
I see you now. All right, there you go.
Okay, well then let me. So I showed this. Did y'all see this?
Well, okay. Classical baby names. I see it now.
Classical baby names.
Right.
All right. And on page 72.
I see Esau at the top.
Okay. Now.
Man, you're good.
There we go. Can you read that for us?
It's floating. Here we go. I believe it says
of internet. According to the commentaries on Hebrew scripture, Esau is considered a significant character in world history and the forefather of the Roman Empire.
And the forefather of the Roman Empire. So if he's the forefather of the Roman Empire, how do we generally describe what Romans look like?
Gay white men.
I'm not going to use that adverb gay.
It's true.
An adjective, I'm sorry, gay, but white people. Absolutely.
Now, Brother Michael, I did have a student. His name was Esau. Esau Toombs was his name. And he was a black man. Well, he's a grown man now.
Okay.
And his mom always argued the fact that Esau, same thing the book said, Esau was a biblical name. And I've had this debate with several people that Esau was a biblical name, but they never researched the verse in the Bible in which, reference to Esau and God hating Esau.
This is true. That's
they
true.
just said, we know of Jacob a biblical name, Esau's a biblical name, so I'm gonna name my child this because the name is in the Bible, without reading the reference of scripture of how his name was used in the Bible or who he was in the Bible.
Right.
Amen.
And so, but I just wanted to show that so that we see that Edom is the Caucasian race that we are making reference to.
Right.
Okay. So let's go back then. Psalms 137, verse 7.
All right. From the top. Psalms 137, verse 7. Remember, O Lord, the children of Edom in the days of Jerusalem, who said, raise it,
destroy it,
even to the foundation thereof. O daughter of Babylon, who ought to be destroyed. Happy shall he be that rewardeth thee as thou hast served us.
Read.
Happy shall he be that taketh and dasheth thy little ones against the stone.
That dashes thy little ones. And that's what I was after. That dashes thy little ones against the stone. Because Revelation said that he that, let me read it. Let's go there so I don't jack it up. He that leadeth into captivity shall go into captivity. So 5 generations ago, some man led my father into captivity. 5 generations back, some man, and that would be for my son, 6 generations back, some man led my father into captivity. Scripture just says, he that leadeth into captivity shall go into captivity. So that man, according to the scripture, has to go into captivity. Now, we understand, we've talked about this before, this concept of regeneration. We'll say that for another time because we've gone into that before. So, but the conclusion of regeneration, we always come back. We always come back into the earth. Okay. And then go to, finally now, in terms of the scriptures, before we get to this book, go to Sirach, Ecclesiasticus, chapter 33, and start at verse 22.
The book of Sirach, chapter 33 and 22. In all thy works, keep to thyself the preeminence.
The preeminence.
The preeminence.
Don't let no man have dominion over you. Don't give yourself over to no man or woman. Don't give yourself over to no man or woman. Read.
In all thy works, keep to thyself the preeminence. Leave not a stain in thy honor.
Leave not a stain in thine honor. So as you keep the preeminence, don't destroy your name through foolish behavior. Okay, read.
23. At the time when thou shalt end thy days and finish thy life, distribute thine inheritance.
At that time, you know your time is near. At that point in time, distribute. So that's why we should and we must have wills, so that before we pass on, our inheritance, however small or great it may be, can pass on to our children, to the seed after us. Read.
I believe this is 24. Fodder or
Fodder.
Fodder and wine.
Fodder is food for animals, bales of hay. Read.
Fodder and wine.
A wine.
And burdens are for the ass. And bread, correction, and work for a servant.
And bread, correction, and work for a servant. For a servant. Okay, read.
25. If thou set thy servant to labor, thou shalt find rest. But if thou let him go idle, he shall seek liberty.
He's going to attempt to be free. So keep your servant busy. Find something to do, something for your servant to do. Keep him busy. Read.
26. A yoke and a collar do bow the neck.
Do bow the neck.
Do bow the neck. So are tortures and torment for an evil servant.
Okay.
Send him to labor, that he be not idle, for idleness teaches much evil.
Because while he's idle, he's plotting. He's making plans. He is but busy, where he doesn't have time. And you think about what's the state of us in this modern America. We are busy. We don't have time to read a book, to figure out answers. We don't have time to educate our minds in matters of engineering, in matters of developing the land, in matters of the deeper secrets of the Most High. We don't have time to sit and study and plan, because he keeps us busy. Read.
28. Set him to work as is fit for him, if he be not obedient, but on more heavy.
Put on more heavy fetters. Read that again, please.
Put on more heavy fetters.
From the top, 28.
28. Set him to work as is fit for him, if he be not obedient. Put on more heavy fetters.
Right? So you got this. this man here, this servant that you have, he's very skilled at what he does. So he completes his task in half the day. All the other servants that you have, it takes them all day long to complete the task. Well, this one right here that you have that completes the task in half the day, give him more work. Figure him out to give his butt more work. And if he has a corrupted mind, put fetters on that man, meaning put chains on that man, put shackles on that man or woman. That's what the scripture's saying. Okay, go on to verse 29.
Sirach 33 and 29. But be not excessive toward any.
Look at that. Here is the scripture to us that says about our servant, be not excessive toward any. So we're not taking the whip and scourging this man to the end that skin, flesh is coming off his body. Be not excessive. Read on. We're gonna see is maybe Brother Michael ain't interpreting 29 correctly. Well, as we continue to read, let's see if I'm interpreting correctly or not. Read.
Be not excessive toward any, and without discretion do nothing.
And without discretion do nothing. Right? Read.
If thou have a servant, let him be unto thee as thyself.
If thou have a servant, there it is right there. Let him be unto thee as thyself. So, in the same manner you treat you, treat your servant. If you're not gonna beat you up, I called Elder Shamash earlier today, and because I wanted his counsel on a matter. And his words to me were, you're not gonna shame yourself to the ground, are you? And I had to laugh at what he was telling me. But that was pretty heavy what he told me. He said, you ain't gonna shame yourself to the ground concerning this thing. So in the same like fashion, the Bible is telling us with our servants, how you gonna treat yourself? Deal with your servant in the same like fashion. Read.
From the top again. Sirach 33 and 30. If thou have a servant, let him be unto thee as thyself, because thou hast bought him with a price.
Because thou hast bought him with a price. You paid money for this servant. He belongs to you. Read.
31. If thou have a servant, entreat him as a brother.
Look at that. So we're not going to be, yes, we're going to have servants in the kingdom. That's what Isaiah 14 and 2 was about. We will have servants in the kingdom, but we will entreat the servants as brothers, as sisters. Read.
For thou hast need of him as thine own soul. If thou entreat him evil, and he run from thee, which way wilt thou go to seek him? Will
he go to the north? Are we running up to Canada to find him? Are we running down to Mexico to find this servant? Of course, we'll be back in our homeland. We'll be back in Israel at that time. Okay. All right. So then let's get into this book. Let's get into this book. Okay. And so once again, this is the work of Robert William Fogel. And now Robert William Fogel, okay, this is Fogel. He died in 2013. It says that he is son of a Ukrainian Jewish immigrant from Odessa. Okay, so we covered a few Sabbaths ago, we covered the 13th tribe, revealing the origins of the Ashkenazi Jew, the Khazarian
Yeah.
Jew. Okay. So we know that these are not truly individuals that descended from Jacob, but rather these are individuals that descended from Esau. Okay. So this is who this guy is. Let's get into his work. Okay. Bear with me. So this book is going into, he is asking the question, what is the primary reason for slavery in America? Okay. What about slavery in America are the reasons that it just took off? And so let's get to the pages. We can read some of this information. Right. So let's start with this paragraph right here. These questions, speaking of the previous paragraph, these questions represent only one level of the debates over the findings. Some scholars insisted that the findings must have been an error, that they were the product either of unrepresented samples of evidence or of outrageous errors in the technical analysis of the evidence. Others contended that the moral implications were so pernicious that the findings should have been suppressed, even if factually correct. But a more common concern was that the findings could serve to misdirect. Is the text large enough?
Yeah.
Okay, is the text large enough?
Yep.
Duran, is the text large enough for you?
Yeah, it's good enough.
Okay, let me make it a little bit larger. That better?
Yep.
All right, here we go. Discussion of slavery into unproductive and potentially harmful channels. All right. And then here we go. The ultimate issues of this book are moral issues. The ultimate issues of this book are moral issues. They are not nearly as simple as many of us were taught to believe, nor is their relevance limited to the bygone era of slavery. Quite the contrary, many of the moral issues of Lincoln's time have reappeared and are involved in divisive debates of our own time that go well beyond ethnic or class relationships. To confront the moral problem of slavery, then, is not only to gain a deeper perspective on our past, but also to understand the issues of our own time in a new way. Now, this is the 1970s when this man is publishing this book.
Okay.
And here we are 30, 40 years even after that, and we are still dealing with these issues. Now, what he does not go into in this book, and I haven't read the whole book just yet. I've only read, honestly, I've only read chapter 1 thus far in trying to prepare for this class. But what he doesn't touch, I want to touch this really very quickly. Go to Ezekiel chapter 35. I just want this to be in the background of our thinking in terms of what the scripture says. So we want to see Ezekiel chapter 35, verse 1. And then read verse 1 first. 1 and 2.
Ezekiel 35 and 1. Moreover, the words of the Lord came unto me, saying, Son of man, set thy face against my seer.
Mount Seir. Mount Seir is making reference to Edom. Mount Seir is making reference to Esau, because this is where they inhabited. Okay. Jump down to verse 5.
Ezekiel 35 and 5. Because thou hast a perpetual hatred and hast shed blood of the children of Israel by the force of the sword in the time of their calamity, in the time that their iniquity had an end.
In the time that their iniquity had an end. It says that Esau has had a perpetual hatred, an never-ending hatred, and that hatred continues. So here it's reading past tense, has had. That's past tense. But that we see in 2021 that that's still current. We see what this author is bringing out, that in 1970s, that hatred was still prevalent. In the 1500s, 1600s, 1800s, that hatred was still prevalent. Go ahead.
Yesterday, I brought the scripture out yesterday evening. There was a sister that asked the question, why should I not be married to this white man?
Okay.
And she said, should we hate them? God said he knew. And then I took her here and, just showed her the perpetual hatred. And she was about in tears.
Mm-hmm.
I just want to share that real quick, please.
Should we hate them? Bible does say God hates them. Bible tells us, get that real quick. Go to Romans. Here's how we want to behave towards all men. Go to Romans chapter 12, verse 18. Romans chapter 12, verse 18.
Romans chapter 12, verse 18.
And this scripture is also relevant to this topic that we're discussing today, this whole topic of slavery. Even, the fact that we are recording this, and so someone down the line might even come across this. Here's what the scripture says. Here's what the scripture says. Read.
Romans 12 and 18. If it be possible, as much as lieth in you, live peaceably with all men.
Some men.
All men.
All men, it says. But let's take note of the first 4 words. If it be possible. If it be possible. If it be possible. As much as lieth in you, live peaceably with all men. So that's what we want to charge everyone listening to today's class. As we want to charge you with, thus saith the Lord, if it be possible, as much as lieth in you, live peaceably with all men. Okay. So now back to this book, The Rise and Fall of American slavery. So it says the ultimate issue of this book are moral issues. They are not nearly as simple as many of us were taught to believe, nor is their relevance limited to the bygone era of slavery. Okay, and then it goes on. Let's jump down to this next paragraph. Since the moral problem of slavery must be viewed in historical context, it is necessary to review all major results of the new slavery research. The discussion focuses initially on the economic findings because the production of the great agricultural staples of the Western Hemisphere and their sale on the world market were the roots and trunk of modern slavery. So this man, what he does, this guy is an economist. That is his primary work, William Fogel. He's an economist of his day. And so he's identifying slavery being a cash market, slavery being working in a capitalistic society. And so he's looking at the commodities of the day of the slave era to see how did economics affect and play a role in slavery. So that's the lens that he's seeing everything through. And so to him, everything that he's bringing to the table, it's making sense from a money perspective, from an economic perspective. And so, all right, so as we go on, so that you all have that in your understanding. Let's jump down. What's that, slavery?
Yeah.
What about it?
Well, we got to talking about the fakeness of the so-called Boston Tea Party. England, the British, and it was said that they did that because they just wanted liberty and all this. But I said, well, the true thing about that, because I learned it from you, it was really about slavery. It wasn't, they just covering up, if you will, what really happened in regards to the Boston so-called Tea Party. That's all.
That particular book, I think you're making reference to, if we're talking of the same book, I think that's going to come out in this lesson. All right, but not that particular account. But this paragraph right here. However large the role of economic considerations in the origins and spread of American slavery, once established, the slave system of production had powerful ramifications in other spheres, meaning Europe, meaning Asia, meaning Arabia, meaning Africa, in other spheres. As it evolved, slavery became the principal factor controlling relations between whites and blacks in the United States. I'll say that again. Slavery became the principal factor controlling relationships between whites and blacks in the United States, with consequences that still shape the course of American life. This is the 1970s. Moreover, the struggle over slavery affected all aspects of politics, not only in America, but around the world, producing slogans, ideologies, policies, and alignments that are still active and that deeply influence the politics of our own age. And here we are 40 years later of our own age. Okay. Let me get down to, let me see here, where is it at?
Yeah, but that was, we were talking about commodity at that time as well, and the commodity was disguised as, oh, well, it went with tea, threw all the tea away, and that's why America loves coffee and not tea. That's just, that's just to throw something at the window to distract your attention.
Mm-hmm.
When really it was about, they were sending over slaves that were tainted, if you will. When I say they, I'm talking about Great Britain. You know, you follow what I'm saying? They bringing slaves to America off these ships that were tainted. What I mean by that, they were sick, they were weak, and they were taxing America for these slaves, right? America said, man, sure, we got made in America. Says, y'all want to bring up the slogan? We got slaves made here in America, healthier and stronger, and we're not taxed.
Right. I'm gonna touch that. That's I have intentions on pulling that particular document. No, you're good. You're good. To the table. So no, that's good that you speak on that.
But it's just weird that was part of my discussion with someone yesterday.
So and this book, and it reads, this book combines analytical and narrative history. I've endeavored to make a good story, one that will be edifying and intriguing to the wide range of readers. The book contains 3 subplots. One is the story of American slavery as an economic and social system. The second is the story of ideological and political struggle to abolish the system. And then he goes on, these 2 subplots woven together constitute the rise and fall of American slavery. The third subplot is the story of scholarly efforts, especially during the last 3 decades, to ferret out the truth, to bring out, to pull out the true story of American slavery, to tell it wie es eigentlich gewesen. And that in English, that German translated to English, it means like it actually been. So tell it like it is. Okay, tell it like it is. So, and all this information is information that's coming after World War II. Okay, trying to get to this one little point that the man makes over here. Bear with me. Let me look at my notes, you all. Forgive me. Okay, let me jump to page 11. Jump to page 11. All right. So that was the intro of his book, and he's going into numbers now. He's starting to get into it, and he's kind of leading. He wants to start off with, you know, what was the main thing? Was it cotton? What, you know, why did we rely so heavy on slaves? So here we go. It is customary to date the beginning of the New World traffic in Africans to the year 1502, when the first references to Blacks appear in the document of Spanish colonial administrators. The end of this trade did not come until the 1860s. Over the 3.5 centuries between these dates, about 9,900,000 Africans were forcibly transported across the Atlantic. Now, I have other sources that show that this 9 million is 12 million and or 14 million folks who were transported across the Atlantic Ocean. And they always want to speak on the Holocaust. So even by this man's account, this number is larger than the number recorded concerning the Holocaust.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Brazil was by far the largest single participant in the traffic, accounting for 41% of the total. British and French owned colonies in the Caribbean and the far-flung Spanish-American Empire were the destinations of 47%. Dutch, Danish, Swedish colonies took another 5%. The remaining 7% represent the share of the United States. So what this tells me is that all of the Caucasian families had their hand in participating in us being enslaved.
Okay, yes.
All of the Caucasian families had their hand in participating in us being slaves. Captors. I know Russia's not there, and there are some countries that are not.
Dutch, Danish, and Swedish. That's a big load.
They had all of them had their hand in participating. Okay. To those who identify slavery with cotton and tobacco, the small size of the U.S. share in the slave trade may seem surprising. The temporal pattern of slave imports, however, clearly reveals that the course of the Atlantic slave trade cannot be explained by the demand of these crops, cotton and tobacco. It's not cotton and tobacco. So let's instead of looking at things from a spiritual angle, because Ezekiel says that they will have perpetual hatred for us. That would be us examining things through a spiritual lens. The scripture says, "He that leads into captivity shall go into captivity." That would be us examining things through a spiritual lens. Let me show you one more. Go to Jeremiah. Jeremiah chapter 17, starting at verse 1.
Call it again.
Jeremiah chapter 17, verse 1, and we're going to read through verse 6.
The book of Jeremiah, chapter 17, verse 1. The sin of Judah is written with a pen of iron.
The sin of Judah, speaking about the southern kingdom. It was the southern kingdom that primarily saw the travesty of the Atlantic slave trade. This would be Judah, Benjamin, and Levi, which today we call them the American Negro, the Jamaicans, the Haitians, the Trinidadians. These are the individuals that would be Judah, the house of Judah. Read.
The sin of Judah is written with a pen of iron.
A pen of iron. This can't be blotted out. It's going to happen. The consequences of our forefathers' sin, the consequences are going to manifest. Read.
And with the point of a diamond, it is graven upon the table of their heart, and upon the horns of your altars.
Read.
Whilst their children remember their altars and their groves by the green trees upon the high hills. O my mountain in the field, I will give thy substance and all thy treasure to the spoil, and thy high places for sin. throughout all thy borders. And thou, even thyself, shall discontinue from thy heritage that I gave thee.
We would lose everything. We would lose our land. We would lose our families. We would lose our name. We would be called Williams. We would be called Smith. We would be called Holmes. We would be called Taylor. We would be called Johnson, and so forth. Read.
And I will cause thee to serve thine enemies in the land which thou knowest not.
In the land which thou knowest not. Read.
For ye have kindled a fire in my anger, which shall burn forever.
Now I know someone listening to this might be thinking to themselves, well, historically, the kingdom of Judah went into Babylonian captivity. That's true. When we read Jeremiah from a historical perspective, you're absolutely right. But the consequences did not just end with the book of Jeremiah and us going into Babylonian captivity for 70 years. Because after Babylonian captivity, we went into the Persian Mede captivity. We went into the Greek captivity. We went into the Roman captivity. And then we start reading other history books, and we continue to see our demise. We saw the siege of Jerusalem in 70 AD. We saw the Hacienda in the 1200s taking place, starting to take form, take shape. Okay, read.
Which shall burn forever. 5. Thus saith the Lord, cursed be the man that trusteth in man, and maketh flesh his own, and whose heart departed from the Lord.
And whose heart departed from the Lord. Okay, so back to this book, says cotton and tobacco. That's not the thing. So what is? So let's start with this sentence right here. Atlantic slave trade cannot be explained by the demand of these crops. Over 75% of all slaves were imported between 1451 and 1810. This fact clearly rules out cotton as a dominant factor in the traffic, since the production of cotton was still in its infancy in 1810. So if they were bringing folks to the Americas between those years, 1451 and 1810, he's saying it wasn't cotton and tobacco, because that didn't really kick off until 1810. Okay. There was also an enormous increase in the extent of the Atlantic slave trade during the 18th century. This fact rules out the possibility of a major role for tobacco. During the 18th century, tobacco imports into Europe increased at an average annual rate of about 350 tons per year. Since an average slave hand could produce about a ton of tobacco yearly, the total increase of the tobacco trade over the century required an increase of about 70,000 hands, a minuscule fraction of the 5.7 million slaves imported during the same period. So why so many hands? What's the commodity, the production line that the slaves are working on? It was Europe's sweet tooth, rather than its addiction to tobacco or its infatuation with cotton cloth. That determined the extent of the Atlantic slave trade. Sugar was the greatest of the slave crops. Between 60 and 70% of all the Africans who survived the Atlantic voyages ended up in one or another of Europe's sugar colonies. Let me see if I still have this image. I may have nope, I don't have that image anymore. I took it down. Okay. There was an image showed all this modern day candy. And this is the folks who are working on the 1619 work. And it's an article on Google, and they show all this candy and said, here is the ugly truth, behind the candy, the chocolate and so forth that we consume today. Okay. Let me get my notes up. Bear with me. See where we want to go. All right. Go to page 13. Take you to page 13. Okay. Bear with me. Here we go. I'm going to start right here at this paragraph. Right? Another feature of the New World slavery was the large scale of the enterprises on which slaves labored. In the beginning, before 1650 in the British West Indies, or before 1725 in the Chesapeake Bay region, most slaves lived and worked on fairly small farms. In Barbados, prior to 1650, for example, more than 3/4 of the island's population was white. These early colonists were usually Englishmen of modest means. Most were indentured servants. Now, I want us to take a look at that word right there. Most were indentured servants. Remember, we read earlier Leviticus chapter 25. Let's get it real quick. And verse 39.
Leviticus chapter 25 and verse 39. And if brother was by the wax poor and be sold unto thee, thou shalt not compel him to serve as a bond servant, but as an hired servant and as a sojourner. He shall be with thee and shall serve thee until the year of Jubilee.
All right. Now, turn the screen. And read that.
People also ask, what was
right here? Indentured servitude.
Indentured servitude refers to a contract between two individuals.
A contract. You don't say. An agreement. Read.
In which one person worked not for money, but to repay an indentured or loan within a set time period. However, indentured servant could be sold, loaned, or inherited, at least during the duration of their contract terms.
So this is not the same thing as a slave. Indentured servitude is the same thing that we read in Leviticus chapter 25, verse 39 and 40. It's very similar to that. We're talking about slaves, okay? So most making reference to these Englishmen, making reference to these, where was that word at? White men, okay? Most were indentured servants, but some were landowners whose farms were fairly small, generally under 50 acres. So they had lands that were 50 acres and less. Yet we can get our hand on 1 acre of land
Hmm.
to do something with.
Yeah, we can get our hand on 50 feet.
50 feet of land to do something with. Most of the landowners employed only a few laborers, each at the first English indentured servants and later on also African slaves. But whether farmers, indentured servants, or slaves, those who labored in the fields generally did so in traditional ways. So the whole point of what he's trying to get at is that the initial startup of slavery, it was not a lot of slaves on the property. Um, so he's constantly making the point, he's trying to drive home the point that sugar, the production of sugar, brought this influx demand for slave labor. And it also changed the dynamic in which slave labor was operated. Okay. So starting right here at this paragraph at the bottom of the page right here. The advent of the sugar culture beginning in Barbados about 1640 transformed the British West Indies. The replacement of tobacco by sugar not only changed the main market crop, but also the lives of the agriculturalists. So here we are growing tobacco in the initial, but yo, we can make a lot of money growing sugarcane. Let's get on the sugarcane kick, y'all. Small farmers were rapidly consolidated into plantations. White and black hands who had farmed in traditional ways were replaced by large gangs of slaves working in lockstep and moving methodically across vast lands. As early as 1680, the median size of a plantation in Barbados had increased to about 60 slaves. Where it was just a few, now we need more and more and more. Over the decades, the typical plantation in the West Indies became larger and larger. In Jamaica in 1832, on the eve of the abolition of British slavery, the median plantation contained about 150 slaves, and nearly 1 out of every 4 bondmen lived on units containing at least 250 slaves.
Mm.
Okay, and this is all because of, let's get into the business of sugar.
Mm.
Okay, bear with me, let me look at my notes.
Yes, my grandfather down in Mississippi, he formed sugar cane and soybean.
And soybean.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
He had his own, he had acres. He had acres, and he formed it up until he got sick from pneumonia.
Okay.
He died at the age of 98.
Mm.
He lived to be 98. He was still
Farm.
man.
Here's why. Find it. Bear with me.
Yeah, we got sugar cane every summer. I mean, bushels up. We would go down to Mississippi and come back with bushels of sugar cane.
Mm-hmm.
It was delicious, obviously.
So
why people love that sugar so much, because it is addictive.
So let's start right here. Here's why they thought to themselves, yo, we need to do this. As late as 1860, the average value of capital invested in an American cotton textile factory was just $109,000, and the average number of employees was just 130.
Mm-hmm.
Throughout the 18th century, the greatest slave plantations of the sugar colonies, with profits averaging about 10% on investment capital. So if I invest $1, I'm getting my dollar back plus 10%. So for every time I invest $1, I'm getting my dollar back plus 10% of that. That's a high profit margin.
Definitely.
Even in today's, you know, if we just look at generally, you good if you getting a 4% profit margin on something. So here you getting 10% increase. I'm jumping on it. Was the mindset. Okay. Let me look at my notes. See where we want to go. Okay. Yeah. This is another interesting thing, how sugar and this whole slavery system changed the concept of work hours. Okay, so here we go. Sugar planters led the way in still another major technological innovation, the development of a new industrial labor discipline. This was at once their greatest technological achievement, the foundation of their economic success, and the ugliest aspect of their system. In considering this feature of New World slavery, it must be remembered that throughout the medieval era, custom controlled the pattern of European labor and the distribution of the product between serfs and lords. The lords did not set the exact hours of labor. So we're talking about pre-sugar.
Okay.
Pre-sugar, the lords didn't have no kind of set time on, you know, we work this many hours, yada, yada, yada. We get up at this time, we do work at this time, yada, yada, yada. Okay. Strictly supervise the quality of field work, limit the number of holidays, or penalize inadequate yields, although there were bailiffs who supervised labor services on the Lord's land. The rhythm of work, which developed gradually over centuries, was generally slow and variable, and the mode of labor was highly individualistic. Every nation that has gone down the road of industrialization has had to come to grips with the difficult problem of converting peasants into industrial laborers. So in Russia, they had these problems, and all across various countries, they had these problems saying, hey, we got to get with the time. We need to work from 6 a.m. to 3 p.m. and blase, blase, blase. As recent as the 1920s, 1930s, Stalin complained about the dog resistance of Russian musics to the demands of modern assembly lines. A century earlier, British manufacturers had complained about the bad industrial habits of their rural recruits, folks coming in from the country, finding them to be entirely lacking in discipline while on the job and constantly indulging in illicit holidays that came to be called Saints Monday, Saints Tuesday. In other words, they lazy as hell. That's what he's saying. Operatives fiercely resisted the regimentation required by the new mode of labor. According to Andrew Ure, an apostle of the factory system, it was nearly impossible to convert persons past the age of puberty, whether drawn from rural or from handicraft occupations, into useful factory hands. It's like, yo, we got to get these people at 12, and we got to get them at 10, we got to get them at 8, because this right here, this ain't working. We trying to switch over, and
Getting them at 5.
we got to get them at 5. After struggling for a while to conquer their listless or restive habits, they either renounce the employment spontaneously or are dismissed by overlookers on account of inattention. This resistance reflected not the laziness or innate incompetence of the workers, but their unwillingness to be dehumanized to the so this is the reason why they won't do it. I'm not doing that. You ain't gonna treat me like a doggone pig, like a farm animal. No, that was the attitudes. Okay, so then it goes on. So the sugar changed all of this. I'm trying to get to the point instead of reading and trying to get right to the point. I think it is just talking about the participants. Okay, here we go, over here. Okay, here we go. So this guy, Frederick Law Olmsted, described one instance in which he observed 2 very large hoe gangs moving across the field. And so it's these gangs that begin to set the standard for the industrial time in terms of labor. You working from sun up to sundown, you finna put all these hours in and so forth.
This was the RL's time.
Who?
You won't do these hours or else.
You gonna do these hours or else? Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Frederick Law Olmsted described one instance in which he observed 2 very large hoe gangs moving across the field in parallel lines with a considerable degree of precision. He reported that he repeatedly rode through the lines at a canter, with other horsemen often coming upon them suddenly without producing the smallest change or interruption in the dogged action of the labors. Okay. Each work gang was based on an interval division of labor that not only assigned every member of the gang to a precise task, but simultaneously made his or her performance dependent on the actions of others. So here we are. So now I'm fussing at you. Shamash, come on, man. Causing me to get whipped by this doggone whip. Hurry up. Right? So now there's infighting going on amongst the slaves. So then here is what it looked like right here. This right here. I thought this was just crazy. Okay. First, let me start right here. On the McDuffie plantation, the planting gang was divided into 3 classes. First, the best hands, embracing those of good judgment and quick motion. So that's the first line of workers out in the field. Second, those of the weakest and most inefficient class. These are the lame, the elderly, and what have you, the women, what have you. The second class of hoe hands. So they had the hoe in their hand, was the third, was the class that was behind. Thus, classified, the first class will run ahead and open a small hole about 7 to 10 inches apart, into which the second class dropped from 4 to 5 cotton seed, and the third class followed and covered with a rake. And that's how they worked it. That's how they increased the production. Okay, and this some of the stuff is just crazy, man. Bear with me. Okay. So also,
Deep drop cover. Deep drop cover. Deep blank cover.
so then he goes on as he's explaining all of this, and this is heavy too for us, especially when we start looking at other books. When we start saying, well, the American Negro is of the tribe of Judah, and so and so is of the tribe of Levi, and so and so is of the tribe of blah blah blah. Um, as he's going about sharing this information, I'm going to start right here, where it says, where this word "it" is. Okay. It was only toward the middle of the 18th century, after slaves became geographically concentrated. Believe you me, they kept good record of where they were getting their slaves from and where they were being transported to. Brother Michael, how can you say that? That, can you all see this book? Let me know if y'all can see this book. Yes, no?
No.
No?
No.
You
Yep.
see it?
Atlas of the transatlantic slave trade. Yep, I see it.
Okay. So even in this book by David Iltis and David Richardson, okay, and in this book, Atlas, let me see here.
No,
Atlas of the transatlantic slave trade. Okay. He is revealing, this guy is revealing maps of where slaves were coming from and maps of where they were being transported to. Okay. And he's showing numbers. And as he goes through, he's also he's giving you details in writing about the findings. So this is a good book to get, to know, to see, okay, how can you all make these claims that the American Negro is historically, genetically, of the children of Israel from the tribe of Judah. Okay, so it's through these various books that we make these claims. Get back to this document. I hope you all are enjoying this so far.
Mm-hmm.
Bear with me. Okay. So now, it was only towards the middle, I was reading this part here, it was only towards the middle of the 18th century, after slaves became geographically concentrated, that they emerged as the majority of the population in certain countries. The U.S. pattern of crop specialization also affected the size of the units on which slaves lived and had far-reaching effects on the development of slave culture during the colonial era. Okay. Where was that at? Bear with me. Just want to make sure I Okay, let me read this paragraph, because I believe this is going to lead me to another thing that I want to share out with you all. Okay. U.S. slaves were not only in closer contact with European culture, they were also more removed from their African origins than were slaves in the Caribbean, down through the end of the 18th century and into the 19th century. The majority of slave populations of the British and French Caribbean islands and of Brazil were born in Africa, because Africans were continually imported to offset the high death rates there. So that's what's going on in the Caribbeans. Indeed, as late as 1800, 1/4 of the population of Jamaica consisted of Africans who had arrived in the New World within the previous decade. On the other hand, Creoles, slaves born in the New World, made up the majority of slave population in the U.S. colonies as early as 1740. By the time of Washington's presidency, the African-born component of the Black population had shrunk to a bit over 20%. And why is that? It hovered close to this share from 1780 to 1810. 1808, slavery becomes outlawed in the Americas, 1808, and then rapidly headed towards zero. So by the time 1810, we no longer see African-born slaves in the Americas. Why is that? Brother Michael, please share. So here we have this book right here. It's page 15, so I can get back to it. This book, The American Slave Coast, The History of Slave Breeding Industry by Ned and Constance Sublett. Okay. Slave breeding. Concocted by yours truly, Thomas Jefferson. Come on, Brother Michael. Thomas Jefferson? Okay, I'll take my word for it.
Not our forefather. Do that.
He wouldn't do that.
When he followed the Constitution.
So here we have, right here, Africans were only the seed. Africans were only the seed. We just want you to come. We want to bring you to America so that we can have you produce children. Africans were only the seed. By 1860, those few 100,000 Africans had given way to 4 million African Americans. Each birth was, as Thomas Jefferson described it, an addition to capital. The South did not only produce tobacco, rice, sugar, and cotton as commodities for sale, it produced people. Virginia had been slave breeding since the 17th century. It had the oldest, most deeply rooted African-American population and the largest, with 4 more slaves than any other state. This is Thomas Jefferson. This is his concoction. And with much of the land already burned out for tobacco farming by the time of the Declaration of Independence, the agricultural productivity per labor in Virginia was low. The most profitable thing for Virginia planters to do with their growing slave population was to sell young people to traders for shipment down south. So they had a plan already set in motion to end the import of slaves into America. So they had a plan put in place to stop importation of slaves because they figured we are going to produce slave babies ourselves, and we will be the ones you have to come to buy slaves. Slavery itself did not end in 1808. Only the importation of slaves ended in 1808. According to this work right here, according to the history. So Thomas Jefferson and them said, here's how we will do this. Now, it'll take us 20 years to before we start seeing the fruit of our labor. So they always thinking long term. They think long term.
Made in America.
And so they said, we're gonna have produce these babies, and we'll cut off the importation. We'll make it illegal for any territory of the New World to purchase slaves from another country. And that will free us also of taxation by British, who taxes us heavily when we want to purchase slaves. And that's what this whole book details.
That's what I learned from you before.
Okay, so now back to this book. Hope you all are enjoying this so far.
Yeah.
Bear with me. Let's see. Okay. Let's go to page 20. Page 20, political factors. Political factors. Bear with me. All right, here we go. So apparently I want to read this paragraph to you guys according to my notes. Yeah, political and cultural factors. All right. So here we go, right here. Political policies and cultural factors in the Spanish colonies, on the other hand, tended to inhibit the development of gang system plantation. As a consequence, Mexico, Peru, Cuba, Puerto Rico, which all had climates and soils eminently suited for the large-scale production of sugar, did not become significant producers of this crop for the international market until 3 centuries after they were conquered by Spain. Cuba and Puerto Rico turned to large-scale sugar production late in the 18th century. Mexico and Peru did so at the end of the 19th century after the abolition of slavery. For most of the colonial era, the majority of the slaves in the Spanish colonies were generally employed in small-scale enterprises. In Peru and Mexico, slaves were heavily concentrated in producing a wide array of agricultural commodities intended for the domestic market rather than for export, with considerable numbers employed as domestics or craftsmen in the cities. Some slaves were employed in mines, but they were generally a minority of miners. Is that what I wanted? No, I read the wrong paragraph. I'm sorry, you all. Don't be upset with me. That's what I was trying to get to right there. Although gang system plantations became more important as time went on, they never became dominant in tobacco. An analysis of the farms in tobacco region of Kentucky and Tennessee revealed that 65% of the tobacco crop in 1860 was produced on free or small slave farms. Large-scale plantations, those with 51 or more slaves, accounted for less than 10% of the region's tobacco output. The failure of gang system plantations to sweep aside traditional farming was due not to entrepreneurial failure, or moral reservations. It ain't about morale as to why we're not using this. We can care less about morale, but to biological characteristics of the tobacco plant, which limited opportunities for the division of labor and for the organization of production on an assembly line basis. Political and cultural factors also affect the outcome of the contest between slave and free labor. The growth of capitalism in England during the 17th and 18th centuries led the crown and parliament to encourage the formation of large-scale slave plantations. Since these capitalist plantations were producing commodities eagerly demanded at home, English governing authorities were prepared to stimulate them with subsidies where necessary and to remove legal impediments. Ironically, the English tradition of representative government meant that the formulation of the laws that gave legal definition to the institution of slavery was left to colonial legislators dominated by slaveholders. These legislators passed a series of statutes during the 17th century that quite literally deprived Africans of their humanity in a legal sense, reducing them to the status of mere property. Make them niggas slaves because this is good economics. Okay. What did I read? Deprived not only of economic and political freedom, but also of the right to marry or to be set free, even if it was the master's wish, except by an act of the legislator. Okay. And so because prior, so he kind of closed off, bear with me, let me get my notes. I want to make a point here with what he just talked about. Okay, bear with me. Slave codes. So they had slave codes that they had in play. Make sure that did I read slave codes just yet? Was that up here? I think that might be up here. So let's talk about these slave codes. Okay. All right, here we go. Is that large enough for you guys? All right.
Yes, sir.
Good, good. The slave codes were laws relating to slavery and enslaved people, specifically regarding the Atlantic slave trade and chattel slavery in the Americas. Most slave codes were concerned with the rights and duties of free people in regards to enslaved people. Slave codes left a great deal unsaid, with much of the actual practice of slavery being a matter of tradition rather than formal law. Okay. And so they had these codes in place that dictated how to treat the slave, what the slave could do, what they couldn't do, such as, let me take it back. Let me make it large. I'm trying to make it so that we can see it properly. Can you all still see it?
Yeah, see it pretty good.
Okay, good, 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 good. Okay, so like here are some of the typical codes. Movement restriction. Most regions required any slave away from their plantation or outside of their cities they resided in to have a pass signed by their master. Many cities in the slave states required slave tax, small copper badges that enslaved people wore to show that they were allowed to move about. Marriage restrictions. Most places restricted the marriage rights of enslaved people, ostensibly to prevent them from trying to change masters by marrying into a family on another plantation. Marriage between people of different races was usually restricted, which, okay with that one, this one right here, prohibitions on gathering. Couldn't gather. Law to prohibit you from, like us gathering tonight, especially if we got technology that allows us to gather via Zoom. But otherwise, we'd be gathering at an agreed upon location. No, you can't gather. Slave codes generally prevent large groups of enslaved people from gathering away from their plantations. Slave patrol, okay? Trade and commerce by slaves, punishment and killing of slaves. So if they killed you, they got away with it. Slave codes regulated how slaves could be punished, usually going so far as to apply no penalty for accidentally killing a slave while punishing them. Later laws began to apply restrictions on this, but slave owners were still rarely punished for killing their slaves. You ran away thinking I'm finna run to Canada. You got caught in Illinois. They brought your butt back to Georgia and said, "Oh, you want to run, huh?" And they whipped you so they gave you 41 slashes. And it was that 41st slash that sent you into hyper shock and you died.
You mean lashes?
Lashes. What'd I say?
Slash.
Same thing.
Get the knife, forget the whip, go straight to the blade.
Right, that whip. And it was right until you died. Oh, well, yeah, I was beating him. He ran away. Oh, well, the nigga deserved it. That's how it was. Education restrictions. Some codes made it illegal to teach slaves to read. This is the history.
You know, when they kill us now, today, like Trayvon Martin and Mike Brown, so forth and so on, their lashes, if you will, is when, Mike Brown he stole from the store. He deserved it. Trayvon Martin didn't obey the fake security person. He fought him and almost beat him. He deserved it. You know, that's the lashes we get today.
Right.
They figured that, hey, the nigga deserved it. That's why he's dead today. That's all.
He had it coming.
Yeah.
He had it coming. So now here's the other thing because we read about the slave codes. We read about how Europe put these laws into place that encouraged slavery.
Hey, Brother Israel.
Huh?
Before you go to that, could you go back to the slave codes? I want to ask you something about the slave codes.
Okay.
All right.
Go ahead.
Now, I was looking at these slave codes you're talking about, and from what it looks like and what I'm thinking, all these slave codes still exist to this day. They just transferred them out. No.
From a purely historical, factual basis, I don't know if they still exist or don't exist.
Well, if you think about it seriously, they covered it up. If you think about it, if slaves needed a pass to show where they're going and when they're coming back, isn't that the same thing we do when we go give a kid a hall pass?
Or passport.
Or a passport.
I mean, isn't that the exact same thing?
I hear you. I hear you loud and clear.
I mean, and with a marriage restriction, isn't that the same thing as the need of a marriage license? Because that's why marriage licenses first came about, to keep us in check for marrying their women and to keep tabs on who we're marrying.
Well, let me go to the scriptures on that one real quick.
Okay.
I'm gonna deviate just for a second, especially since this is being recorded.
Okay.
Right.
All right.
Because we do want our brothers and sisters to practice having a marriage license.
Right. I'm not disagreeing with the marriage license per se. I'm just saying their intent on it to keep us in check.
Right. I get you. You sharing something with me. I never knew that. What you just shared out.
Yeah, and that's why I've always told myself I don't write hall passes for this exact reason.
Go to the book of Tobit.
All right.
Chapter 7. And let's go to verse 12. Let's start at verse 12.
All right.
The book of Tobit, chapter 7 and verse 12. Who is that?
Raguel.
Tobit chapter 7 and verse 12. Raguel said, then take her from henceforth according to the manner, for thou art her cousin, and she is thine. And the merciful God give you good success in all things. Then he called his daughter Sarah, and she came to her father, and he took her by the hand and gave her to be wife to Tobias, saying, behold, take her after the law of Moses.
Take her after the law of Moses. Read.
And lead her away to thy father. And he blessed them.
Okay.
And called Edna his wife.
Now, after it says, and he blessed them, there's a semicolon. So the sentence, the thought is still being carried out. Read.
14. And called Edna his wife, and took paper.
This is Raguel and Edna, right? The father and mother of Sarah. Read.
And did write an instrument of convenience.
Of covenants.
Covenants, thank you. And sealed it.
So they wrote an instrument of covenants and sealed it. So Raguel and his wife, Raguel had a seal. They had, like we see in the movies and so forth, with wax and what have you. And so he wrote out the document saying, hey, we acknowledge that this man and this woman are joined together in matrimony.
Right.
In holy matrimony, according to the law of Moses, stamped it.
Right.
Okay. And I'm just putting that out there, especially since this is being recorded.
Of course.
We do want our brothers and sisters to approach relationships from the perspective. One more scripture. Hebrews chapter 13, verse 4.
Hebrews chapter 13, verse 4. Marriage is honorable in all, and the bed undefiled. But whoremongers and adulterers God will judge.
So we don't want our brothers and sisters approaching relationships with the mind of I'm a test it out. I'm gonna test drive it before I take it home. I'm gonna drink the milk without, how that phrase go. We talk about the milk before the cow or whatever.
Oh yeah, why about the cow? You get the milk for free or test the milk?
Yeah.
And so we want to encourage our brothers and sisters to approach relationships with the mindset of commitment,
Of course.
according to the Mosaic law.
Gotcha.
Okay. But in terms of if what you're saying is a historical fact, then you're teaching me something, because
because everything we do for good, they're gonna take it for evil. Everything. And like you say, that's the word, to have a marriage license. But that their original purpose of the marriage license is to keep track of us and to know who we're marrying, and if it's one of them or if it's one of us, and to keep tabs on us, what we do. For census purposes.
They double that up with consensus as well.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But the Most High told us not to take a census.
Oh,
He
yeah.
got
Right.
angry with King David for taking census. Told us that we don't participate in taking census.
Because we don't use our senses not to take a census.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So that's the slave code. Did you have more on this that you wanted
Just
to add?
about the slave patrol, but we know the slave patrol, who they really are.
Yeah.
That's the police, so that's a
That's
given.
the police today. Now I have seen histories stating that modern day police was birthed from slave patrol.
Yeah, because the leader of the slave patrol was given the name sheriff. And that's where the star come from, to let them know that he was in charge. And he had a deputy, and he was the second in command. And it just passed on historically to the police.
And this is a lot of this stuff is still right now. And the guy said, in forward or whatever, or his introduction, he said, this stuff is still going on.
Yeah, and like I say, slavery never really changed. They just ratified it.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. But now, this too right here, this is heavy.
Okay.
This next little paragraph that puts, he says, several scholars have placed special emphasis on the role of the Spanish church, identifying it as the prime arbiter of the social and intellectual life in Spain's New World colonies. And so, again, this is where you want to get books called The Inquisition, and to see more history on how slavery manifests to the end. We have we don't know who we are. Why is it solely Black people and brown people that constitute those that have been enslaved, during the time period of the transatlantic slave trade? Okay, so the Inquisition, of the social intellectual life in Spain's New World colonies. Not only did it define the moral basis of society and determine the limits of its intellectual worldview, but according to this interpretation, it also sanctified and legalized the most basic human relationships. The principal objective of the Spanish church in the colonies was to bring all the quote unquote primitive heathens, such as Indians as well as Africans, into its fold. conceding the right of the colonists to the labor of Indians and Africans, conceding the right of colonists to the labor of Indians and Africans, the Spanish church nevertheless insisted on its right to determine the moral, religious, and even social conditions under which this labor was conducted. Yes, make the Negroes and the savage Indians, make them the targets of slaves. That's what this is saying. Okay. And it goes on. Where did I leave off? It was the aim of the Spanish church to preserve as much of the legal personality of the slave as possible, including the right to full Christian communion, and through the sanctity of the Spanish church, the right to marriage and parenthood. These principles, it is argued, led the Spanish church to defend the right of slaves to personal security, to private property, and to the purchase of their own freedom. Voluntary manumission was promoted through the system called coercion, under which a slave could petition a court to set the price at which he could purchase his freedom. But this is a farce, you all. Yeah, it's a law, but it's a law that was not, just like many of the laws between America and the Native Americans, Sitting Bull, Geronimo, none of them trusted who they called the white man, because the white man never, right, he never came through on the agreements that were always, he always lied. Okay. Once the slave became cortado, he had a whole range of rights, including the right to change masters. So again, this is a farce. Okay. Whatever the forces influencing the Spanish crown and leaving the debate over the relative mildness or harshness of the day-to-day treatment of slaves for later consideration, the weight of evidence indicates that decrees of the crown severely restricted the rise of large-scale gang system plantation of capitalist plantations that produce primarily for a world market. To begin with, the Spanish crown limited the importation of slaves below the level desired by planters. Although smuggling reduced their effectiveness, these restrictions nevertheless raised the cost of obtaining slaves and so reduced the supply. Moreover, the fact that slaves could marry even against the wishes of the master and that married families could not be separated certainly restricted the economic latitude of masters, especially when the spouse was a free person. So the slave was like, this right here, these Spanish rulings, they're getting in the way of my business. Hence, we get books like this one here that I spoke about, the Slave Coast history. Okay. But now there's this other article. Okay. Bear with me. Let me get it. This article right here. So now this article is coming from Cambridge University Press. And it's going into the very same thing that he talked about with the Spanish church being the primary arbiter. Okay. So this is a scholarly article from Herbert Klein. Okay. Within colonial Latin American society, the Spanish Catholic Church was the prime arbiter in the social and to a considerable extent in the intellectual life of all men. Not only did it define the moral basis of society and determine the limits of its intellectual worldview, but it also sanctified and legalized most basic human relationships. While this was the traditional role of the church in Catholic Europe, and especially within Spain, the church in the New World also faced the unique task of dealing with non-European peoples and defining their place within traditional social patterns. You a slave, nigga. Acutely aware of this problem, from the first days of the conquest, the church conceived of its primary function in the New World as an evangelical one. This is of God. This must be. It has to go this way. Putting aside its harsh and negative role as defender of the faith, which dominated its European attitudes against other peoples of the book, it adopted a positive role of sympathetic conversion of virgin peoples to the true faith. Oh, come be Christian, walk in our Christian. We will be a slave and we will teach you Christian values.
Mhm.
But again, what Christ are they speaking of?
They're speaking of El Diablo.
While the thrust of this missionary activity was directed toward the American Indians, the Evangelical Catholic Church of the New World also intimately concerned itself with the other great religiously primitive peoples of African Negro slaves. That's who the target is. Negroes and American Indians. These are, go to Deuteronomy chapter 28 and verse 68.
Deuteronomy 28:68. And the Lord shall bring thee into Egypt again with ships.
And the Lord shall bring the children of Israel into slavery again. That word Egypt, according to Exodus chapter 20, verse 2, that word Egypt means slavery, bondage, captivity, according to Exodus chapter 20, verse 2. Read.
By the way whereof I spake unto thee, thou shalt see it no more again.
Thou shalt see your homeland, Jerusalem, no more again. Read.
And there ye shall be sold unto your enemies.
And where those boats stopped, where those boats docked, and our ancestors got off, what happened? Ye shall
be sold unto your enemy for bondmen,
slave men,
and bondwomen,
slave women,
and no man shall buy you.
and no one's going to save you out of the condition. And here we're reading who the targets were: American Indians and Negroes. That's the target. It goes on here on the article. From the beginning of slave importation, I'm at the highlighted part on the article. From the beginning of slave importation, in fact, the church took up the position that the American Negroes were to be considered part of the New World Church on much the same level as the untutored American Indians, slaves. And while the church was often forced to concede colonists prior claims for the labor of these black and brown races, the church was often forced to concede colonists' prior claims. Colonists beat them to the punch. Christopher Columbus beat them to the punch. Hernandez Cortez beat them to the punch. What's the guy name? I got the book over there. The short account of Bartholomew de la Casa. Beat him to the punch. Says it never relinquished, the church never relinquished its position as the guardian of the moral, religious, and even social life of the untutored Indian and Negro races within the New World domain. Now that speaks to what you were saying, Brother Joseph. That right there, that sentence speaks to what you're saying. It never relinquished its position. It's saying we forever have right, moral obligation to the Negro and untutored Indian to enslave them unto Christendom. Okay, so let me go back to this article. We almost done, you all. We almost done. Oh, I wanted to show you this thing that is a farce. Bear with me. Yeah, this here. So this was the system that they were talking about. Can you all see it okay?
Yep, see it good.
All right. Coartación was a system of self-paid manumission in colonial Latin American slave societies during the 16th to 19th centuries. It enabled slaves to make a down payment and to set the price of their freedom, conferring on them the status of cortado, which brought extra rights and privileges to the slave. The term originally comes from the Spanish word coartar, as meaning to cut off or limit. How they would set the price for freedom and cut it off from the rising market price so that the master could not ask for a higher price. But by the 18th century, it had become coartación, as meaning hindrance or restriction, in reference to the action of restricting the slave master's power because of the whole marriage thing and so forth. So the slave master, I'm not going to let my slave go marry this free woman or marry this other woman that belongs to such and such slave. No, then that means I lose my slave, because the two of them, if they union stay together, one of them is going to leave the plantation. You understand the dilemma from the slave master's perspective?
Yeah.
Nah, if you're gonna marry somebody, you're gonna marry on my plantation. You know, there are some churches right now in Israel that say, that have the mindset, they teach the congregation, don't deal with a brother or sister, don't deal, especially to the women, don't deal with a brother that is not of this congregation.
Right.
It sounds like the same mindset.
I went to a church that said that years ago. So I know you're right.
Because we gonna lose you.
Yep. Yeah, that's exactly what they said.
Church.
Yeah. Yes, sir.
And then they'll they'll package it up. Yeah, you're gonna go marry that other brother in that other church. You're gonna be wife number 7, wife number 10. That's how they package it up.
Right.
Why not leave it open, and why not get to know?
Have faith in your own church.
Have faith in your own church. Have faith in your daughters or the brothers or whatever. But moreover, why not get to know the brothers of that other church? Why not to build? Because that could bring, just like marriages historically brought unity. So why not? Okay, you are the elder of that sister or what have you, right? Especially dealing with the women primarily, right? You're the elder of that woman. Okay, bet. Why not get to know that brother? Just like you would get to know the brother that belongs to your organization. You know, and see what church he belongs to and so on and so forth. And granted, if he belongs to an organization who is teaching doctrine contrary, first and foremost, to the scriptures, to say secondary or tertiary, I think is neither here nor there. But if this brother is speaking doctrine according to scripture, then like you just said, Elder, this gives you all an opportunity for the two organizations to team up, to work together at some level.
It's about nation building.
It's about nation building. Moving on. Origins, it says, no, the origins was boring. The only thing that was interesting from this section was that it was based on the Siete Partidas Legal Code of 1348. Okay. Here we go. This here. The slave would begin by fixing the price of his or her freedom with the master in the presence of the court and paying a substantial portion of it, which would then draw up a certificate identifying the slave as the new designation, the coratado. Forgive me, those that speak Spanish. This process could be complicated. However, as several different appraisers could be used who would come up with widely different estimations of value, the coratado would then usually pay installments over a period of time until reaching the full price of freedom. And it goes on, basically saying, yeah, this was the process, but the slave owners, they found ways around this thing. They did not allow this thing to unfold the way it's supposed to unfold. They found ways to get around it. Okay. And I think, let me see. So here we're in the last little bit of this. Let me see. Let me see. Yeah, this last little part right here. Again, this is the first chapter. The outcome of the contest between slave and free labor thus turned on a combination of technological, economic, political, and cultural factors. Technological and economic conditions were necessary, but by themselves were not sufficient to tip the scales in favor of slave labor. For the gang system to succeed, there had to be a set of crops that allowed the division of the production process into a series of simple and easily monitored tasks. There also had to be a rapidly growing demand for such crops. Even so, the gang system flourished only where political and legal conditions kept the cost of operating gang systems plantations low. To operate effectively, the system required an adequate supply of slaves, wide latitude in the use of the force needed to achieve an industrial discipline, and freedom to reallocate its labor force as economic conditions might dictate. Meaning, we got to do away with the with that legal action that we was just looking at, the Spanish word that I'm jacking up. Just how much interference with optimum conditions a slave economy could tolerate varied from time to time and place to place, depending on such factors as the relative supply of free labor, the levels of demand for those commodities in which the gang system had an advantage, the relative advantage of an unfettered gang system in the production of specific crops, and the skill of particular planters in the management of their enterprises. From the early 16th century until the end of the 18th century or beyond, the relevant factors conspired in the southern United States and in the British Caribbean to promote the victory of slave over free labor. We want to get rid of indentured servants. We want to hold on to the slaves. We don't want to have an opportunity for the slaves to come from under our control. When the scales began to tip in the other direction, it was due mainly to adverse developments in the ideological and political arenas. These ideological and political reversals, as we shall see, had far-reaching economic consequences. Okay. All right. And so I want to show one more passage. Go to Psalms. We read this last week. I want to read it one more time this week. Go to Psalms chapter 83.
Verse 1.
Mm-hmm.
Psalms chapter 83 in verse 1. A song or psalms of Asaph.
Asaph.
Keep not thou silence, O God. Hold not thy peace, and be not still, O God.
Mm-hmm.
For lo, thine enemies make a tumult.
For lo, thine enemies make a tumult, a noise. Read.
And they that hate thee have lifted up the head.
They have lifted up the head. Meaning, where was that at? Where was that at? Bear with me. Go to, this is just one place to go to. I want to go another spot though. Go to, where is it at? Sirach chapter 12 and verse 10.
Sirach chapter 12 and verse 10. Never trust thine enemy, for like as iron rust, so is his wickedness.
Never trust thine enemy. Read it again.
Never trust thine enemy. First of all, Sirach 12 and 10. Never trust thine enemy, for like as iron rusted, so is his wickedness.
Right? And so who is the enemy? We're about to read about the enemy in Psalms, but this other part too in Sirach. Bear with me. Where is it? That's not what I want. I think it's in chapter 6. I think it's in chapter 6.
Sirach chapter
I
6.
think it's in Sirach chapter 6. I think.
My son.
Wait. I forget exactly where it is. It's in Sirach, what I'm after, but I forget exactly where it's at. But because it says in Psalms, it says they have lifted up the head. And so this passage in Sirach is talking about how he might show himself humble and bow his head. But as soon as he has an opportunity to lift his head up, you're going to see that person for who they really are. Bear with me. Let me take one more stab at this. Sirach chapter 12. 12 and 11, the next verse. Read 10 and 11 together.
All right. Sirach chapter 12 and verse 10. Never trust thine enemy, for like as iron rusted, so is his wickedness. Though he humble himself and go crouching, yet take good heed and beware of him.
Yet, though he humble himself and go crouching, he had his head down, go crouching, right? He's bent over. He's in a submissive posture. He goes crouching. Read.
And thou shalt
yet take, though he go humble himself and go crouching.
From the top. Though he.
You start with the word yet.
Yet take good heed and beware of him. And thou shalt be unto him as if thou hast wiped a looking glass. And thou shalt know.
He's dirty as all get out. He's smudged up as all get out. He's greasy and oily as all get out. He's wicked and vile as all get out.
Like when you're in the shower and that steam gets on the glass and you wipe it off and you see the real deal. And thou shalt and thou shalt know that his rust hath been altogether wiped away.
Read one. Go.
Set him not by thee.
Set him not by thee. Who? The enemy.
The enemy.
Read.
Lest when he hath overthrown thee, he stand up in thy place. Neither let him sit at thy right hand, lest he seek to take thy seat. And thou at the last remember my words, and be pricked
therewith, and be pricked therewith. Now we started off at Deuteronomy chapter 32, verse 8. We went on, we looked at Leviticus, where we were seeing the law concerning slavery. Go to, before we return to Psalms, go to Deuteronomy chapter 28. And read verse 43.
Deuteronomy 28 and 43. The stranger that is within thee shall get up above thee very high.
The stranger, the other heathen, the other nation that is within thee. Remember now, Edom. Let me share the screen real quick. Okay, so here is the kingdom of Israel, northern kingdom, southern kingdom, and just south is the kingdom of Edom. So you mean to tell me these individuals were not coming up in here and residing up in here? Yeah, they were. Absolutely, they were. Because they're too close together. So here's the kingdom of Edom right here. And just south of Edom, you had the Arabs. Okay, read that.
Deuteronomy 28 and 43. The stranger that is within thee shall get up above thee very high, and thou shalt come down very low.
And we shall come down very low. We came down to the ground. Read.
He shall lend to thee, and thou shalt not lend to him.
We go to the banks asking him for loans. Read.
He shall be the head, and thou shalt be the tail.
That's the curse. These are the curses that we are reading, that we are living in. To the end, we must need a savior. Okay? And then go back to Psalms to close out. Go back to Psalms.
Psalms 83 and 3.
Let me get there, please. Go ahead.
All right. They have taken crafty counsel against thy people,
And
and consulted against thine hidden one.
that's what I wanted. They have taken crafty counsel. And I wanted that because the article, the ending of the chapter, this is what it said. The ending of the chapter. Where is it at? It says, I'm looking for it. What is that word, conspiracy? Who can help me out?
I'm searching it now.
I
don't see it in here. But that ain't saying a whole lot, because
I just read that word conspiracy. Well, it was in here. The word conspiracy was in here. We just read it. My apologies, but we just read it. That's why I came to this Psalms 83. All right. So continue reading.
they have, Psalms 83 and 4, they have said, come, let us cut them off from being a nation, that the name of Israel may be no more in remembrance.
Read.
For they have consulted together with one consent. They are confederate against thee. The tabernacle of Edom and the Ishmaelites of Moab and the Hagarenes.
So let me show you this. They are confederate together. We read about how the Spanish church and so on and so forth. I'm gonna make this the last little thing. We getting there. Okay, the asiento or contract. The asiento de negros, agreement of blacks, was a monopoly contract between the Spanish crown and various merchants for the right to provide African slaves to colonies in the Spanish Americas. The Spanish Empire rarely engaged in the transatlantic slave trade directly from Africa itself, choosing instead to contract out the importation to foreign merchants from nations more prominent in that part of the world, typically Portuguese and Genoese, but later the Dutch, French, and British. The asiento did not concern French or British Caribbean, but Spanish America. The 1479 Treaty of Alcacovas divided the Atlantic Ocean and other parts of the globe into two zones of influence, Spanish and Portuguese. The Spanish acquired the west side, washing South America and the West Indies, whilst the Portuguese obtained the east side, washing the west coast of Africa, and also the Indian Ocean beyond. The Spanish relied on African slave labor to make their American colony project possible, but now lacked any trading or territorial foothold in West Africa, the principal source of slave labor. Thus, the Spanish were reliant on Portuguese slave traders for all their requirements. The contract was usually obtained by foreign merchant banks who cooperated with local or foreign traders specializing in shipping. Different organizations and individuals would bid for the right to hold the asiento. The original impetus to import enslaved Africans was to relieve the indigenous inhabitants of the colonies from the labor demand of the Spanish colonies. The enslavement of Amerindians had been halted by the influence of Dominicans such as Bartholomew de la Casa. Spain gave individual asientos to Portuguese merchants to bring slaves to South America. So once again, this is your friendly neighborhood Catholic church who is doing all of this. And they have consulted together with one consent. They are confederate against thee. And that talks about all these nations who took part in our slavery. Okay. With that, I'm going to say that's all, folks. Do we any
stage left?
Any questions, any comments, any concerns? Anything you want to say that you thought was interesting with this? I'm gonna go ahead and stop recording at this point.
I have a question, Brother Michael.
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
All right.
Hold on, wait a second. Let me make sure that the recording has stopped.
Okay.